So she's eating Native American dishes and African dishes and Spanish dishes all mixed together. But as far as she's concerned, that's just Southern cooking.
And so you telling me the pancake cornbread comes from Africa too?
It probably does, cooking in that style.
Yeah.
But what's interesting,
you know what
Right.
When
Like
you-
injerads they have in Ethiopia. This is perhaps why Dr. King said, can we sit down at the table of brotherhood together?
Mm-hmm.
Because generally speaking, if you can get people to eat food together, somebody had to work really hard to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we know within our culture that your grandmother was working extra hard because what was actually accessible to her. You wouldn't have likely been able to get filet mignon. You're more likely to be able to get the end cut of shoulder rump.
Yeah.
Roast rump,
The hip, the butt.
Right, some
Yeah.
aspect. So as time has gone on, now oxtail soup is considered by some a delicacy.
Who brought oxtails here, man?
it's a good question. It's one of those things where it pops up in the Caribbean, but it pops up in other places. And what's so interesting about it is things go back and forth. So for example, sweet potatoes, very popular right now in West African cooking, but they're not West African. Yams are. But sweet potatoes grow quicker, and so you can grow them cheaper. So what happened is the Portuguese bring sweet potatoes to Africa. African people eat it, say it tastes like a yam, but it grows quicker. It becomes an African food, comes to America as an African food, but it's not. It's from South America. So
Whoa.
it bounced from South America to Portugal, Portugal to Africa, Africa back to the New World. And so you end up with all of these things. My favorite of all is sit down any group of poor people, anywhere in the world, and put a bowl of grits in front of them. They'll all call it by different names, but they all know what it is. In Italy, it's polenta, and now it's expensive, but it's just boiled corn. My mother growing up, it was grits. My father would serve it the next day sliced and fried as fried mush.
Yeah, I had it.
And
I had a mush.
So but
How about yellow grits?
yellow? Well, my dad preferred the yellow grits.
Okay, now what? That has to be an African dish, because now a lot of our Haitian brothers and sisters, yellow grits,
Mm-hmm.
straight up.
They were probably cheaper. I hate to say it, but when you look at food, bread, the whiter the bread, the more expensive. The whiter the sugar, because more processing goes into it.
Okay.
So when you have yellow grits, that's just corn.
Yeah.
When you have white grits, they had to bleach it. So
Yeah, that's a starch process. The
exactly.
bleaching process. And see, I say that because now we have Haiti that comes into effect with the dishes, because that's like on this hemisphere the closest place to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the grits and the eating, and
And what's so interesting there also is that then you've got the French influence in Haiti, the same way you've got the Spanish influence in Florida.
and Toussaint Louverture was from Benin, Africa. He did the revolt off the coast of Haiti. A lot of people think he's from Haiti. His grandfather was over the Alada tribe in Benin, Africa.
And the leadership that he represented was understood. I learned this, the Gullah Geechee Heritage Court
Correct.
is another project I've been involved in, as well as the Haitian American Historical Society. We were able to get one of their countrymen recognized, General Jorge Biasu,
I've heard of Jorge,
who lived on St. George Street, and we were able to get his former home recognized.
Oh, okay. Historically
Because
recognized.
he was the second highest paid man in Spanish Florida and the highest ranking Spanish general of the time here. The mixture between these three cultures, as I understand it, over time in Charleston and New Orleans, both of those ports received 1.5 million Africans.
Okay.
Over a couple hundred years, each of them begun known as having this world-class cuisine. If you had been in Paris and you went to wealthy planters in New Orleans, they will serve you some amazing food. And that's the top of it. The bottom of it is sailors and people who are just getting passage from one place to another who realize, gee, this reminds me of what my grandmother used to make. Gee, we used to sing a song like this.
Hymns, old hymns
Right.
and stuff. Okay.
The last time I saw Andrew, he told me something that I didn't know. He said, Jane, if you notice, most of these dishes the Spanish made all have pork in them. I said, yeah, how about that? He goes, well, that's because, well, I'll let you tell it.
Well, two reasons really. One, pork is cheap. Pigs take very little care. You let them out in the woods and you slaughter them when the time comes. So that's one important part. But the other one is, to the Spanish, food tells you, it tells you who you are and what your connections are. So for the Spanish, one of the things was they want to establish where you fall in their categories.
Okay.
And one of the major things was, are you a Christian? And it's not good enough to be a Christian. Are you a Catholic? And they can find that out very quickly. They sit you down to a nice meal. If it's a Friday, it's fish. No meat on the table because everyone's Catholic. And if you complain, get out.
They know.
They know.
Okay.
But more important still is this. They put down a piece of pork in front of you. You've come to meet my daughter. And I'm sitting there and I put out a beautiful pork roast. You say, oh, I'm just not hungry. I know one of two things about you. You're either Islamic or you're Jewish.
Oh.
Because you won't eat pork.
What?
And so immediately, that is a yes-no question on a plate. If you won't
very
eat
subtle.
pork, I don't have to ask you another question. I won't go into business with you. I won't let you marry my daughter. I may report
No
you to
deal.
the authorities.
And you know what? Even in Robert Greene and the 48 Laws of Power, it talks about the meal, the free meal. Just bringing it back to correlation. Nah, don't take a free meal, but when you think of it, that's why you don't take even a meal with someone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
And
you know,
so-
you got to be careful who you break bread with.
And they were so competitive. I was just in New Orleans recently, and they were saying that if you were French Creole, their definition of Creole in Louisiana is different than the Caribbean.
I know. I
To
know.
them, it means you speak French,
Mhm.
you were born in Louisiana, and you were Catholic. So in colonial times for them, if you were Creole
And your bourgeoisie to
and,
an extent.
and an American or an Englishman come to visit, you could talk to them on the front porch, but you couldn't let them in the house.
Because then they receive through the colonial